Jasmine Crockett is pissed off because obviously they made Democrats look like idiots. The Texas Legislative Council asked the Congress to verify their address, and right after, when they dropped the maps, several Democrats were removed from their districts, which means that they wouldn't be representing the current districts which they are at, right? We know that this is so that they consolidate power within Republicans and gain more seats. We know that DT called Governor Hot Wheels, and this is in motion with a strategy that he wanted to push, right? And I know she's pissed because what she affirmed was a strategy that I've positioned on my channel, which is the fact that if we want to achieve any sort of impactful offense against this administration, it's not going to be through lawsuits, it's not going to be through legislation, because there's no willingness, right? There is the political status quo and there's also the legal status quo. So we have to accelerate that through different channels, right? One of them, what's being positioned, right? California redrawing the maps in order to basically Uno reverse card. This is what I call leveraging the power and the economy of blue state in order to push against the federal encroachment of state rights, but also the states' encroachments of the constitutional rights within their borders, right? Because ultimately, in the court's position, it's up to every state. It's a capacity in which states have much more maximum control over how elections and how politics and how society looks like, even away from the constitutional support, right? Because even if it is illegal, unconstitutional, who gets to enforce it? That's going to be the executive. But even if Texas is against the constitution, is the executive going to enforce against Texas? That's not going to work. So ultimately what we have to do is accelerate the exhaustion of the courts, the exhaustion of Congress, right? I did a video on this, so I'm not going to touch on that, but in this video, Jasmine Crockett calls on the blue states to unite and a block an offense against it, right? She says, you need to wake up and realize that these people don't care about the law or the Constitution. She says she's going to sue, of course. She's going to utilize litigation because she says she's confident it's violations of the Voting Rights Act. But ultimately, that's going to end up at the Supreme Court, and we don't really know how that's going to go because they've been positioning against the Constitution, right? But that's the thing, since the Constitution is so incomplete, there is room for MAGA to basically hijack it and redefine it to mean something else with the help of the formation of legislation through the MAGA majority and also through the Supreme Court, right? So ultimately, wherever law ends, tyranny begins. And in order for us to move away from constitutional norms like the capability of a blue state governor to build his own militia, right, we have to exhaust on the courts, and this means accelerating that. How do we accelerate that? That's the question. And here's the thing, because I've been holding my own state responsible because we're the fourth largest economy, so like, how can I criticize Michigan? How can I criticize Oregon when we have the economy to actually be capable of leading and ensuring that other states feel comfortable and retaliating against a rogue government, right? Under Article 6, Section 3, our obedience isn't to the government, it is to the Constitution. And if this government is breaking the Constitution, if the government is creating lawful away from the Constitution, then we have no obedience to those laws that are away from the Constitution. And this is where it's up to states like California to be capable of pushing on this litigation in order for that to be capable of being decided on in an accelerated way, but also to position whatever is on our arsenal to help mitigate the harm against red states, right? And not only against red states, but our elections, because that's going to ultimately affect us on the federal elections, right? So assuming it goes through and we have to vote in the special elections in November for these designs, then Californians, and Californians alone, through our right to vote, must not just stand in unity to protect our state, from MAGA, to protect it from the rotten infection of a confederacy, of a white supremacist, of a the South will rise again infection, but we must stand as a blue state, as California, in defense of Texas from their own Texan government. This means voting for the new designs if they come to us in November. Time we show some teeth, time we utilized fire with fire. But we must not just focus and rely on that vote. We must conduct actions beforehand as well. We must utilize the state, our state rights as California, as a state who has a unique majority minority population, as one where we are being attacked under the Equal Protection Clause because our population has a 40% Latino, has over 15 million Latinos. What they're positioning is that they're detaining California Latinos, even if we are citizens, just because of how we look, just because of how we are perceived to be illegal, right? But illegal within California, within our Hispanic background, positions something that is actually default to our states because we don't have the same history as all the other states, right? Texas knows this very well because California was just a symptom of Texas wanting to keep slavery, right? So they literally did an insurrection against the Mexican government. But hey, we're here, so let's not argue about that. But we have to leverage our state to instill chaos at the federal level. Ending federal taxation, which would trigger litigation, of course. California must rise against this through our maximization of state rights. A pressure basically positioning to Congress, positioning through the courts that either you rectify this, either you provide a restoration of the constitutional legitimacy, or you are promoting a dissolution of this union, right? Because for the South to rise, the union must fall. There is no way to keep a risen South without the union collapsing. What they want is to make all the states into the South, into the Confederacy, right? And that's not gonna happen. But California has to be on call in regards to defending against this because this is an existential battle, an existential war. And even though they're going to win battles and they have been winning battles, whether they win the war is up to us. We as the people within the states, we're the ones who will have to pressure our state governments because there's going to be state government officials who won't want to remove their appeasement of this administration because they'll be scared of the consequences. They have to know through the citizens of the state that we are okay with leveraging ourselves in order to be capable of fixing this in one way or another, right? We're willing to be uncomfortable. We're willing to be sacrificed for the better of this country. And ultimately, if we cannot defend the country, then we must defend the state. But ultimately, it has to be leveraged through the state against the federal government, right? And this is our reality in which we live. And I'm glad that Jasmine Crockett is pissed off and she's affirming what I've been positioning, that we have to leverage the blue states in order to be capable of positioning the overwhelming of channels that force them to conduct opinions that exhaust that avenue to where we're capable of moving away from constitutional norms. Because ultimately, once the federal government is moving away from the constitutional provisions, then we have no obedience to it, right? And that's just the reality. They try to gaslight us into thinking that they can change the Constitution without amendments and it's going to be binding because a court says that, when ultimately that's not the design of how we live in. We have to acknowledge that constitutional supremacy isn't judicial supremacy. Constitutional supremacy means the contract above the courts. So ultimately, not even them can subvert it. That's actually treason. Treason from the courts, treason from the Congress, treason from the executive, right? So ultimately, we have to position that we have to have all hands on deck, and ultimately, we need to convince our state governors to actually maximize and act in urgency in the right now, because ultimately we cannot wait for them to make their move. We have to maintain a reality in which we are an offense, not only waiting for that vote in November, but ensuring that there is chaos right now.